Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my continuation of my book reading of Stephen King's Shawshank Redemption. What was your frame of mind in the 17 days between then and the night your wife was murdered? Andy's lawyer asked him. I was in great distress, Andy said calmly, coldly. Like a man reciting a shopping list, he said that he had considered suicide and had even gone so far as to purchase a gun in Lewiston on the 8th of September. His lawyer then invited him to tell the jury what had happened after his wife left to meet Glenn Quinton on the night of the murders. Andy told him, and the impression he made was the worst possible. I knew him for close to 30 years, and I can tell you he was the most self-possessed man I have ever known. What was right with him, he'd only give you a little at a time. What was wrong with him, he kept bottled up inside. If he ever had a dark night of the soul, as some writer or other had called it, you would never know. He was the type of man who, if he had decided to commit suicide, would do it without leaving a note, but not until his affairs had been put neatly in order. If he had cried on the witness stand, or if his voice had thickened and grown hesitant, even if he had gotten yelling at with Washington-bound district attorney, I don't believe he had gotten the life sentence he wound up with. Even if he had, he would have been out on parole by 1954. But he told his story like a recording machine, seeming to say to the jury, "This is it. Take it or leave it." They left it. He said he was drunk that night, that he had been more or less drunk since the 24th of August, and that he was a man who didn't handle his liquor very well. And of course, that by itself would have been hard for any jury to swallow. They just couldn't see this coldly self-possessed young man in the neat double-breasted three-piece woolen suit ever falling drunk over his wife's sleazy little affair with some small-time golf pro. I believed it because I had a chance to watch Andy that those 6 men and 6 women didn't have. Andy Dufresne took just 4 drinks a year all the time, and I knew him. He would meet me in the exercise yard every year about a week before his birthday, and then again about 2 weeks before Christmas. And on each occasion, he would arrange for a bottle of Jack Daniels. He bought it the way most cons arrange to buy their stuff. The slaves' wages they pay in here, plus a little on his own. Up until 1965, what you got for your time was a dime an hour. In 65, they raised it all the way up to a quarter. My commission on liquor was, and is, 10%. And when you add on that surcharge to the price of a fine sipping whiskey, like the Black Jack, you get an idea how many hours of Andy Dufresne's sweat in the prison laundry was going to buy his 4 drinks a year. On the morning of his birthday, the 20th of September, he would have himself a big knock, and then he'd have another that night after lights out. The following day, he'd give the rest of the bottle to me, and I would share it around. As for the other bottle, he dealt himself 1 drink Christmas night and another on New Year's Eve. Then that one would also come to me with instructions to pass it on. 4 drinks a year, and that is the behavior of a man who had been bitten hard by the bottle, hard enough to draw blood. He told the jury that on the night of the 10th, He had been so drunk he could only remember what had happened in little isolated snatches. He had gotten drunk that afternoon. I took on a double helping of Dutch courage, is how he put it, before taking on Linda. After she left to meet Quentin, he remembered deciding to confront him. On the way to Quentin's bungalow, he swung into the country club for a couple of quick ones. He could not, he said, remember telling the bartender he could read about the rest of it in the papers, or saying anything to him at all. He remembered buying beer and the handy pick, but not the dish towels. Why would I want dish towels, he asked, and one of the papers reported that 3 of the lady jurors shuddered. Later, much later, he speculated to me about the clerk who had testified on the subject of those dish towels, and I think it's worth jotting down what he said. Suppose that during their canvass for witnesses, Andy said one day in the exercise yard, they stumble on this fellow who sold me the beer that night. By then, 3 days had gone by. The facts of the case had been broadsided in all the papers. Maybe they ganged up on the guy, 5 or 6 cops, plus the dick from the Attorney General's office, plus the DA's assistant. Memory is a pretty subjective thing, Red. They could have started out with, isn't it possible that he purchased 4 or 5 dish towels, and worked their way up from there. If enough people want you to remember something, that can be pretty powerful persuader. I agreed that it could. But there's one more powerful. Andy went on in his musing way of this. I think it's at least possible that he convinced himself. It was a limelight, reporters asking him questions, his picture in the papers, all topped off, of course, by his star turn in court. I'm not saying that deliberately falsified his story or perjured himself. I think it's possible that he could have passed a lie detector test with flying colors, or sworn on his mother's secret name that I bought those dish towels. But still, memory is such a goddamn subjective thing. I know this much, even though my own lawyer thought I had to be lying about half my story, he never bought that business about the dish towels. It's crazy on the face of it. I was pissed drunk, too drunk to have been thinking about muffling the gunshots. If I had done it, I would have let them rip. He went up to the turnout and parked there. He drank beer and smoked cigarettes. He watched the lights downstairs in Quentin's place go out. He watched a single light go up upstairs, and 15 minutes later he watched that one go out. He said he could guess the rest. Mr. Dufresne, did you then go up to Glenn Quentin's house and kill the 2 of them? His lawyer thundered. No, I did not, and he answered. By midnight, he said, he was sobering up. He was also feeling the first sign of a bad hangover, so he decided to go home and sleep it off and think about the whole thing in a more adult fashion the next day. At that time, as I drove home, I was beginning to think that the wisest course would be to simply let her go to Reno and get her a divorce. Thank you, Mr. Dufresne. The DA popped up. You divorced her in the quickest way you could think of, didn't you? You divorced her with a .38 revolver wrapped in dish towels, didn't you? No, sir, I did not, Andy said calmly. And then you shot her lover. No, sir. You mean you shot Quentin first? I mean, I didn't shoot either of them. I drank 2 quarts of beer and smoked however many cigarettes that the police found at the turnout, and then I drove home and went to bed. You told the jury that between the 24th of August and the 10th of September, you were feeling suicidal. Yes, sir. Suicidal enough to buy a revolver. Yes. Would it bother you overmuch, Mr. Dufresne, if I told you that you do not seem to me to be the suicidal type. No, Andy said, but you don't impress me as being terrible sensitive, and I doubt very much that if I were feeling suicidal, I would take my problems to you. There was a slight tense titter in the courtroom at this, but I won him no points with the jury. Did you take your 38 with you on the night of the 10th of September? No, as I've already testified. Oh yes, the DA smiled sarcastically. You threw it into the river, didn't you? The Royal River. On the afternoon of the 9th of September. Yes, sir. One day before the murders. Yes, sir. That's convenient, isn't it? It's neither convenient nor inconvenient, only the truth. I believe you heard Lieutenant Mincer's testimony. Mincer had been in charge of the party which had dragged the stretch of the Royal near Palm Bridge, from which Andy had testified he had thrown the gun. The police had not found it. Yes, sir. You know, I heard it. Then you heard him testify that they found no gun, although they dragged for 3 days. That was rather convenient too, wasn't it? Convenience aside, it's a fact that they didn't find the gun, Andy responded calmly. But I should like to point out to both you and the jury that the Pound Road Bridge is very close to where the Royal River emptied into the Bay of Jarmouth. The current is strong. The gun may have been carried out into the bay itself, and so no comparison can be made between the riflings on the bullets taken from the bloodstained corpses of your wife and Mr. Glenn Quinton and the riflings on the barrel of your gun. That's correct, isn't it, Mr. Dufresne? Yes. That's also rather convenient, isn't it? At that, according to the papers, Andy displayed one of the few slight emotional reactions he allowed himself during the entire 6-week period of the trial. A slight bitter smile crossed his face. Since I am innocent of this crime, sir, and since I am telling the truth about throwing my gun into the river the day before the crime took place, then it seems to me decidedly inconvenient that the gun was never found. The DA hammered on him for 2 days. He reread the handy-pick clerk's testimony about the dish towels to Andy. Andy repeated that he could not recall buying them, but admitted that he also couldn't remember not buying them. Was it true that Andy and Linda Dufresne had taken out a joint insurance policy in the early 1947? Yes, that was true. And if I equate it, wasn't it true that Andy stood to gain $50,000 in benefits? True. And wasn't it true that he had gone up to Glenn Quinton's house with murder in his heart? And wasn't it also true that he had indeed committed murder twice over? No, it was not true. Then what did he think had happened, since there had been no sign of robbery? I have no way of knowing that, sir, Andy said quietly. The case went to the jury at 1 p.m. on the snowy Wednesday afternoon. The 12 jurymen and women came back at 3:30. The bailiff said he would have been back earlier, but had held off in order to enjoy a nice chicken dinner from Bentley's restaurant at the county's expense. They found him guilty, and brother, if Maine had the death penalty, he would have done the air dance before that spring's crocuses poked their heads out of the dirt. The DA had asked him what he thought had happened, and Andy slipped a question. But he did have an idea, and it got out of him late one evening in 1955. It had taken those 7 years for us to progress from nodding acquaintances to fairly close friends, but I never felt really close to Andy until 1960 or so, and I believe it was the only one who ever did get really close to him. Both being long-timers, we were in the same cell block from beginning to end, although I was halfway down the corridor from him. "What do I think?" he laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. I think there was a lot of bad luck floating around that night. More that could ever get together in the same short span of time again. I think it must have been some stranger just passing through. Maybe someone who had a flat tire on that road after I went home. Maybe a burglar, maybe a psychopath. He killed him, that's all. And I'm here. As simple as that, and he was condemned to spend the rest of his life in Shawshank. Or the part of it that mattered. 5 years later, he began to have parole hearings, and he was turned down just as regular as clockwork in spite of being a model prisoner. Getting a pass out of Shawshank when you got murder stamped on your admittance slip is slow work, as slow as a river eroding a rock. 7 men sit on the board, 2 more than at most state prisons, and every one of those 7 has an ass as hard as the water drawn up from a mineral spring well. You can't buy those guys. You can't sweet talk them. You can't cry for them. As far as the board in here is concerned, money don't talk, and nobody walks. There were other reasons in Andy's case as well, but that belongs a little further along in my story. There was a trusty name as Kendricks who was into me for some pretty heavy money back in the 50s, and it was 4 years before he got it all paid off. Most of the interest he paid me was information in my line of work. You're dead if you can't find ways of keeping your ears to the ground. This Kendricks, for instance, had access to records I was never going to see running a stamper down in the goddamn plate shop. Kendricks told me that the parole board vote was 7-0 against Andy Dufresne through 1957, 6-1 in 58, and 7-0 again 59, and 5-2 in 60. After that, I don't know. But I do know that 16 years later, he was still in cell 14 of cell block 5. By then, 1976, he was 58. They probably would have gotten big-hearted and let him out around 1983. They give you life, and that's what they take. All of it that counts, anyway. Maybe they set you loose someday, but... well, listen. I knew this guy, Sherwood Bolton. His name was, and he had his pigeon in his cell. From 1945 until 1953, when they let him out, he had that pigeon. He wasn't any Birdman of Alcatraz. He just had his pigeon, Jake, he called him. He set Jake free a day before he, Sherwood that is, was to walk, and Jake flew away just as pretty as you could want. But about a week after Sherwood Bolton left our happy little family, a friend of mine called me over to the west corner of the exercise yard where Sherwood used to hang out, and my friend said, "Isn't that Jake, Red?" It was. That pigeon was just as dead as dirt. I remember the first time Andy Dufresne got in touch with me for something. I remember like it was yesterday. That wasn't the time he wanted Rita Hayworth, though. That came later. In that summer of 1948, he came around for something else. Most of my deals are done right there in the exercise yard, and that's where one went down. Our yard is big, much bigger than most. It's a perfect square 19 yards on the side. The north side is the outer wall with a guard tower at either end. The guards up there are armed with binoculars and riot guns. The main gate is in that north side. The truck loading bays are on the south side of the yard. There are 5 of them. Shawshank is a busy place during the work week. Deliveries in, deliveries out. And I'm going to end it here for my continuation of my book reading of Shawshank Redemption. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.